I'm based in Mohkinstsis, or Calgary, Alberta, currently moving to Toronto or Toronto. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, working with textiles, performance, drawing, painting, and sculpture mostly. I'm half Indigenous artist of Mi'Kmaq Metepenagiag descent from New Brunswick, Canada, and I'm half settler. So a lot of my work deals with combating colonizational practices, decolonizational practices with teaching, and bringing awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women and other Indigenous sovereignty right causes as well. Coming to Bemis has been kind of a trip because, of course, I was supposed to come in 2020 for the summer, but with the pandemic, things were pushed back to 2021. And then I started focusing more on getting to know Omaha, Nebraska itself, and then the Indigenous communities here as well, which led me to some really exciting experiments with porcelain and found books here. Dipped all these amazing and weird and awful colonial trash books, I called them, into porcelain, and then did the burnout process in the kilns here. And now I'm working with this ash-like substance that came from the books themselves. So there's something that kind of beautiful to make something in porcelain, but also kind of also beautiful to ruin something in porcelain as well. While being here at the Bemis Center too, I've been exploring different practices like beading, which is something that I'm not attuned to necessarily. I used to bead as a child with my family, and my sister is actually an amazing beader. I'm actually a quill worker, so I work with porcupine quills primarily. But while being here at the Bemis, I'm sure many people are aware of the unearthing of Indigenous children's bodies at residential school sites. So this has been heavily on my mind. My great-grandmother was a survivor of residential schools, and it's something that is heavily talked about in my family and heavily influential into my life, my mother's life, and my grandmother's life, and so on. So I'm really thinking about mortality, and again, a lot of work that I was doing with porcupine quills also deals with abolition, and thinking about systemic racist structures within the RCMP in particular, and other authority structures. And then at the beginning of the pandemic too, the Canadian government's response to aid to many tribal nations was to send body bags instead of sending resources. So I'm thinking about the body bag as a symbol of relationship between the Canadian government in particular and Indigenous peoples. And so I began a process of beading a Hudson Bay blanket body bag that's meant for a child. It's quite a bit smaller than the standard body bag, but it's also quite a bit more potent. In Alberta alone, 50% of the children that went into residential schools didn't make it out. And they've searched so far, I think 6 schools, grounds, out of 165 or more, depending on what you consider a residential school. So it's something that's really heavily on my mind, and it's something that's really meditative to do as well, to bead and to think about life and bodies, and to use craft in a way to focus my maybe rage or emotions through a different kind of meditative practice. So as a Metepenagian woman, and a scholar and an artist, I'm really interested in archives and research. And with a lot of my research, I kept finding this amazing bonnet that was a headdress that used to be a staple within the matriarchy of Metepenagian culture. Or a girl was given when she turned into a woman, she started menstruating. And it's a symbol of like matrilineal power and femininity, and it always has these amazing markings that are very Metepenagian, these swirls, botanical almost, and they're quite beautiful. So my process begins with researching these things, looking for archives, drawing obsessively this object, and then creating the object itself as a textile artist. I'm felting and making these objects, these bonnets, and then wearing and performing them as an action of decolonization in my mind, but also like to bring back and discover a bit more of my culture. So I was really excited at the beginning of this residency to work on this project and to get into it. And it ended up turning into me writing a big grant to get money for the next 5 years to allow myself to get my hands on these bonnets that have been claimed into other people's archives. And a lot of the archives that I get to look at are of course coming from a colonial gaze of rich white men coming into Canada or Turtle Island at the time, taking pictures or drawing lithographs of Metepenagian women wearing these bonnets. They were fascinated by them, and then them taking them and moving them around the world. So I'm not going to name the institutions, but I'm hoping to infiltrate some institutions to reclaim and bring them back to the nation. So it's turned into like a kind of a reparational project.